I never saw it coming. "Mom, we need to talk about your role at Bloom Tech," my daughter Addison said, her voice oddly formal as she gestured toward the conference room. Her sandy blonde hair was pulled back in that severe bun she'd started wearing since landing her first major investor. I followed her, confused by the presence of the entire executive team seated around the table. 3 years ago, I'd left my job as a product designer at a major tech firm to help Addison launch her dream, a company developing specialized medical devices. "Just until you get on your feet," I'd told her then, working countless unpaid hours, designing prototypes, organizing the office, making coffee runs at midnight during crunch periods. I'd given everything to help my daughter's vision become reality. "As you know, we've secured Series B funding," Addison announced to the room, barely meeting my eyes, "which means we need to professionalize all aspects of our operation." My stomach tightened. Something in her tone made me reach for my water glass. Elaine, has been generous in volunteering her time during our startup phase," she continued, addressing her executive team rather than me. "But now we need qualified professionals in all positions. We've hired Devin Walker from Meridian Medical to take over product development, effective immediately." The room blurred around me. A man I hadn't noticed, young, with an expensive haircut and even more expensive watch, nodded in acknowledgement. "Wait, what?" I managed to say, my voice barely audible. Addison finally looked at me, her expression a practiced mask of professional regret. "We're grateful for your help, but you were just filling in until we could afford real talent. You understand, right? This was always temporary." Real talent. The word sliced through me like a scalpel, precise and painfully sharp. "Your building access will be deactivated at the end of the day," she added, already turning her attention to the agenda items on her tablet. "HR will collect your personal items." I sat there, stunned into silence, as the meeting continued around me. Addison, my Addison, had just fired me in front of everyone. Had just dismissed 3 years of my life, thousands of hours of work, the retirement savings I'd foregone to help her. And she'd done it without even the courtesy of a private conversation. After the meeting, I wandered back to my desk in a daze. The office buzzed with excitement about the new funding, new hires, new future, a future that apparently had no place for me. I mechanically packed my few personal items into a cardboard box someone had thoughtfully placed on my chair. As people filtered out for lunch, I found myself alone in the office. 3 years of memories surrounded me. The couch where I'd napped during all-nighters, the whiteboard covered with my handwriting, the prototype lab where I'd spent countless hours perfecting designs. The prototype lab. My feet carried me there without conscious thought. On the workbench sat the latest version of the biotemp monitor. My design, my creation, the device that had secured their Series B funding. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands, remembering how I'd solved the battery heat issue that had stumped everyone else. Something clicked inside me, a realization as cold and clear as ice. Addison hadn't just taken my time and energy, she'd taken my intellectual property. The core design elements, the innovative solutions I'd created, they all came from me, and I had never signed a single document transferring those rights. I slipped the prototype into my purse without thinking. Then I went to the file cabinet and removed all my original design notebooks. They hadn't bothered to digitize my amateur work. "What are you doing?" I turned to find Tyler, the company's legal counsel, standing in the doorway. He'd always been kind to me, one of the few who acknowledged my contributions. "Just collecting my personal items," I said, gesturing to the notebooks. He looked uncomfortable. "Elaine, I'm sorry about what happened." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "You should know," he said, lowering his voice. "Addison's boyfriend William has been pushing for this for months. Since he became CFO, he's been restructuring everything, convincing Addison that the company needs a certain image to attract bigger investors." "William?" I felt another stab of betrayal. I'd never liked Addison's boyfriend, but I'd tried to be supportive. Now it made sense. His constant questions about my designs, his insistence on sitting in on development meetings. Tyler glanced over his shoulder. "He's been shopping around some of your designs as his own innovations to other potential partners. Just thought you should know." As he walked away, something hardened inside me. For 3 years, I'd been the supportive mother, the unpaid worker, the invisible foundation upon which my daughter built her success. I had given her everything, but not anymore. In my car, I looked at the prototype sitting on the passenger seat. I didn't want to hurt Addison. She was still my daughter. But I wouldn't let her and William steal my work, my ideas, my intellectual property. I started the engine with newfound clarity. I'd spent my career as a designer finding elegant solutions to complex problems. And now I had a new problem to solve: how to reclaim what was rightfully mine without destroying my daughter in the process. I scrolled through my contacts and found the number for James Harris, my former colleague and one of the best patent attorneys in the business. "James, it's Elaine. I need your help." I took a deep breath. I've designed something valuable, and I need to protect it before someone else claims it as their own. As I pulled away from BloomTech's offices for what I thought would be the last time, I didn't notice the black sedan that pulled out behind me, keeping a careful distance as I drove home. James's office smelled of leather and expensive cologne. He listened intently as I laid out everything that had happened, occasionally taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "Let me get this straight," he said when I finished. "You designed a medical device that's now the cornerstone of your daughter's company, but you never signed any contracts, NDAs, or work-for-hire agreements?" "Nothing," I confirmed. "I was just mom helping out. Addison never treated it as a formal arrangement." James leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Then, legally speaking, Elaine, you own the intellectual property rights to everything you created." A weight lifted from my shoulders. "So, I can patent my designs?" "Absolutely, and more." He tapped his pen against the pad. "If they're already manufacturing or seeking approval for products based on your designs, we could be looking at a significant infringement case." I shook my head quickly. "I don't want to destroy Addison's company. I just want recognition for my work and fair compensation." James nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Fair enough. We'll start by filing for patents on your key innovations. That gives us leverage without immediately threatening the company's operations." As I left his office, I felt something I hadn't in years, a sense of professional pride and purpose. I was no longer just Addison's mom or BloomTech's office helper. I was Elaine Grenville, designer and inventor. That evening, I spread my notebooks across my dining room table, retracing the evolution of my designs. I'd worked on several projects for BloomTech, but the BioTemp monitor was my masterpiece, a non-invasive device that could continuously monitor internal body temperature with unprecedented accuracy, invaluable for early detection of infections or monitoring patients during treatment. My phone rang, startling me. Addison's name flashed on the screen. "Mom?" Her voice sounded shaky, not at all like the confident executive from that morning. "Some items are missing from the lab, the BioTemp prototype and your design notebooks. Do you know anything about that?" I took a steadying breath. "Yes, I took them. They're my personal work." "Mom, those belong to the company." Her voice hardened. "You need to return them immediately." "I don't think so, Addison. I never signed any agreements transferring ownership of my designs to BloomTech." Silence stretched between us. Then, "William wants to talk to you. He's putting you on speaker." "Elaine." William's smooth voice slithered through the phone. "Let's not make this ugly. Those materials were created while you were working at BloomTech." "Volunteering," I corrected. "And intellectual property doesn't automatically transfer without written agreement, as I'm sure your legal team would confirm." "We have investors expecting results," he said, voice tightening. "If you jeopardize this company's future, you're hurting your own daughter." The emotional manipulation was so transparent, it almost made me laugh. "If you're worried about the company, I'm open to discussing a consulting agreement and proper compensation for my innovations. Otherwise, I'll be protecting my intellectual property through appropriate legal channels." I could hear them whispering to each other before Addison came back on the line. "Fine. Come to the office tomorrow at 10. We'll talk." After hanging up, I sat back, heart racing. For years, I'd taught Addison to stand up for herself, to never let anyone undervalue her work. Now, I needed to follow my own advice. The next morning, I dressed carefully in my most professional outfit, a sharp navy suit I hadn't worn since leaving my corporate job. I placed my notebooks and the prototype in my briefcase and headed for the door. When I opened it, I nearly collided with a young woman on my doorstep, hand raised to knock. "Ms. Grenville?" she asked, looking nervous. "I'm Zoe Johnson. I work at Bloom Tech in the engineering department. I need to talk to you." I hesitated, checking my watch. "I have a meeting at the office in 40 minutes. "I know about the meeting. That's why I'm here." She glanced over her shoulder anxiously. "William told the team that you're trying to sabotage the company. He said you stole proprietary technology." My jaw tightened. "And you believe him?" "No." Her eyes met mine directly. "I know you designed the core technology. I've seen your original sketches, the progression of your work. You solved problems the rest of us couldn't crack." I studied her, trying to determine if this was some ploy William had engineered. "There's more," she continued, lowering her voice. "After you left yesterday, William and Devin, the new guy, were in the lab. They were discussing how to modify your designs enough to work around any patent issues. They're planning to claim they developed a different technology independently." My stomach dropped. "How do you know all this?" "I was working late, testing the prototype units. They didn't know I was there." She pulled out her phone. "I recorded it. And—" she hesitated. "I downloaded copies of all the company's files on the Biotemp project, including emails between William and Devin from weeks ago, discussing how to replicate your work once you were gone." I stared at her, stunned. "Why are you helping me?" Zoe straightened her shoulders. "Because I became an engineer to create things that help people, not to steal other people's work. And because last month, William took credit for one of my improvements to the cooling system. When I spoke up, he threatened my job." I invited her in, and we quickly downloaded the files to my laptop. The evidence was damning. Detailed plans to edge me out, discussions about how to claim my innovations as their own, even contingency plans if I became difficult. "Addison must know about this," I said, scrolling through the emails, my heart breaking all over again. Zoe's silence was answer enough. When we arrived at Bloom Tech, the receptionist directed us to the main conference room. Addison and William were already there, along with Tyler and another man I didn't recognize. "What is she doing here?" William demanded, glaring at Zoe. "I invited her," I said smoothly, setting my briefcase on the table. "She's my technical consultant for this meeting." Addison looked confused. "Mom, we agreed to talk privately." "Plans change," I replied, taking a seat. "Just like company leadership, apparently." William leaned forward. "Let's get to the point. We're prepared to offer you a generous consulting fee as acknowledgement of your contributions. In exchange, you'll sign over all rights to your work and return all materials." I opened my laptop instead of my briefcase. "Before we discuss terms, I'd like to share some interesting reading material." I turned the screen toward them, displaying the first of the incriminating emails. The color drained from William's face. Tyler leaned in, scanning the text, then sat back with a sharp intake of breath. "Where did you get those?" William demanded. "Does it matter?" I clicked through to another email. "This one's particularly interesting, detailing how you plan to modify my designs just enough to circumvent potential patent claims." Addison stared at the screen, then at William. "You said we needed to let Mom go because her designs weren't advanced enough for commercial development." "He lied," I said quietly. "Just like he lied about who actually created the technology that secured your funding." The room fell silent as Addison continued reading the emails, her expression shifting from confusion to horror. Then she turned to William. "Is this true? Did you plan this all along?" Before he could answer, the door opened and a distinguished-looking man entered the room. "Sorry I'm late," James Harris announced, setting his briefcase beside mine. "James Harris, patent attorney." He nodded to me. "I hope you don't mind, Elaine, but I took the liberty of bringing along someone else who's very interested in this situation." Behind him appeared a tall woman in an impeccable suit, her gaze sharp as she surveyed the room. "Allow me to introduce Vivian Tao," James continued, "senior partner at Meridian Medical Ventures. She's very interested in discussing the actual origin of the technology Bloom Tech has been pitching to her firm." William jumped to his feet. This meeting is over. Everyone out except Addison and the board members. I'm afraid, Vivian said, her voice like steel wrapped in silk, that I'm not going anywhere until I understand exactly whose technology my company has been considering investing $20 million in. The tension in the conference room was suffocating. William remained standing, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. Addison sat frozen, her eyes darting between me and the evidence displayed on my laptop. Perhaps, Vivian Tao suggested, taking a seat, someone should explain what's going on here. I closed my laptop. I'd be happy to, Ms. Tao. For the past 3 years, I've been developing the core technology for BloomTech's biotemp monitor. Yesterday, I was dismissed without notice, and today I've discovered plans to appropriate my intellectual property without attribution or compensation. That's absurd, William interjected. Elaine was an informal helper, not an engineer. Devin and I developed the actual proprietary technology. Zoe stepped forward. That's not true. I've worked in the engineering department since the beginning. Ms. Grenville solved our primary design challenges. The thermal regulation system, the sensor calibration algorithm. Those were all her innovations. Vivian turned to Addison. And you are? Addison Grenville. I'm the CEO. Her voice was barely audible. And Elaine is my mother. Vivian's eyebrows shot up. She turned to me with newfound interest. I see. And you never formalized your arrangement? No, I admitted. I was helping my daughter build her dream. I never thought I needed protection from my own family. The words hung in the air, and Addison flinched as if I'd slapped her. Tyler cleared his throat. From a legal standpoint, without any formal agreement transferring rights, the intellectual property would indeed belong to Ms. Grenville. This is ridiculous, William sputtered. We'll contest this. The work was done in our facility, using our resources. Actually, James interrupted, that strengthens Elaine's position. It demonstrates that BloomTech valued her contributions enough to provide resources, without ever clarifying ownership of the resulting intellectual property. Addison finally found her voice. Mom, what do you want? Are you trying to destroy everything we've built? The hurt in her question stung, but I kept my composure. No, Addison. I'm trying to claim what's rightfully mine. Something I should have done from the beginning. Instead of letting you and William take advantage of my love for you. Take advantage? Addison's voice rose. I gave you a purpose after Dad left. You were lost, and I brought you in when no one else would hire a designer in her 50s. The room went silent. Her words cut deeper than she knew. After my ex-husband had left me for his 20-something assistant, I had struggled to find work, facing rejection after rejection despite my qualifications. Addison, Tyler said quietly, that's not helping. Vivian Tao had been observing the exchange with calculating eyes. Now she spoke. While this family drama is fascinating, my concern is more pragmatic. Meridian was prepared to invest in proprietary technology with market potential. If ownership is in dispute, that changes everything. It's not in dispute, I said firmly. I have dated notebooks documenting my design process, original sketches, and prototypes. I also have evidence that BloomTech executives were aware that I was the creator. William laughed derisively. Notebooks anyone could have written at any time? That won't hold up. Zoe pulled out her phone. Will this hold up? She played the recording of William and Devin discussing how to work around Elaine's patents and modify her designs. The blood drained from William's face. Furthermore, James added, we've already filed provisional patent applications based on Elaine's innovations. As of 8 a.m. this morning, any attempt to use these designs without permission would constitute willful infringement. Addison turned to William, her expression hardening. You told me Mom's work wasn't sophisticated enough. You said we needed Devin to elevate it to commercial standards. He avoided her eyes. I was trying to protect the company. Your mother had no formal role, no contract. She could have walked away at any time with our tech. My tech, I corrected. And I didn't walk away. I was fired. Publicly. By my daughter. The room fell silent again. Addison looked at me, really looked at me. For the first time since this began, I could see the conflict in her eyes, the dawning realization of what had happened. I've heard enough, Vivian announced, standing up. Our investment committee needs to be informed of this situation immediately. She handed me her card. Ms. Grenville, I'd be interested in discussing your technology directly, once this ownership issue is resolved. After she left, William exploded. Do you realize what you've done? You've just cost us a $20 million investment. No, William, Addison said quietly. You did that by lying to me about Mom's contributions and planning to steal her work. He turned on her. Don't be naive, Addison. This is business. Your mother was never going to be part of the long-term plan. We needed her to get started, but for Bloom Tech to be taken seriously, we needed real professionals. Each word was like a knife, but I kept my expression neutral. I'd cried enough over the past 24 hours. I think, James said, this would be a good time to discuss terms. Elaine has no desire to destroy Bloom Tech. She simply wants fair recognition and compensation for her innovations. Tyler nodded. That would be the sensible approach. Otherwise, this could drag through the courts for years, draining resources and frightening away all potential investors. Addison straightened her shoulders. What are your terms, Mom? Before I could answer, William cut in. No, absolutely not. We counterfile, claim she stole company property. We fight this all the way. With what money? Addison asked coldly. The Series B funding isn't final, and Vivian is walking out the door right now to recommend against it. There are other investors, William insisted. Not if word gets out that our core technology is under ownership dispute, Tyler pointed out. And not if there's evidence of attempted intellectual property theft by company executives. Addison stood up suddenly. I need to speak with my mother, alone. She led me to her office and closed the door. For a moment, she just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then, to my surprise, tears welled in her eyes. Was any of it real? She asked. Or were you just waiting for the right moment to take back control? Addison, I said softly, everything I did was to help you succeed. I never wanted this confrontation. All I ever wanted was for my work to be valued and acknowledged. I did value you, she insisted. I couldn't have started Bloom Tech without you. Then why fire me like that? In front of everyone? Why let William push me out without even discussing it with me first? She sank into her chair. He said we needed to present a certain image to investors, that having my mother in a key position made us look amateur, and I believed him. She looked up at me, vulnerability replacing the corporate mask she'd worn earlier. He said you'd understand, that you'd be relieved to step back. And you didn't think to ask me? I trusted him, she whispered. He was so confident, so knowledgeable about the business world. I thought he knew better than both of us. I studied my daughter, seeing both the strong woman she'd become and the insecure girl she still was in some ways. Addison, William doesn't care about your vision or your company. He cares about control and taking credit for other people's work. She wiped her eyes. I'm beginning to see that. She took a deep breath. So what happens now? Do you take your designs and leave us with nothing? That depends, I said, on what you really want. Is it Bloom Tech's success? Or is it William's approval? Addison stared at me for a long moment. Then she reached for her phone. Tyler, please come to my office and bring those contracts we discussed last month. The ones for restructuring the executive team. When she hung up, she met my eyes with newfound resolve. I think it's time we discuss the future of Bloom Tech. The real future, not the one William envisioned. As Tyler entered with a folder of documents, Addison's phone lit up with a text. She glanced at it, then looked up at me with alarm. It's Zoe, she said. William is in the lab. He's deleting files and destroying prototypes. We need to stop him, I said, already heading for the door. Addison and Tyler followed close behind. As we rushed down the hallway toward the lab, Addison spoke in a hushed, urgent tone. The company backup server automatically archives everything every night, but he could still do significant damage to the physical prototypes. When we reached the lab, the door was locked. Through the glass panel, we could see William frantically going through drawers and cabinets, tossing items into a box. Zoe stood in the corner, pretending to work while surreptitiously recording everything on her phone. Addison pressed her keycard against the reader, but the light flashed red. He's overridden the access. Get security, Tyler advised. No time, I said, pulling out my own key card, the one they'd forgotten to deactivate in the chaos of yesterday. I swiped it, saying a silent prayer. The light turned green. We burst into the lab. William looked up, startled, the guilt on his face unmistakable as he stood over a shattered prototype. What are you doing? Addison demanded. Protecting our company, he snapped, continuing to gather items. While you're in there being manipulated by your mother, I'm making sure she can't walk away with everything we've built. By destroying company property? Tyler asked incredulously. Necessary precautions, William replied, more controlled now. Just removing some obsolete materials that could confuse our new direction? I walked over to the broken prototype on the floor. This isn't obsolete. This is the first working model of the temperature regulation system, the one I stayed up 3 nights straight to complete before our first investor demonstration. A demonstration that I arranged, William countered. A presentation that I delivered. Investors responded to my vision, not your little hobby project. Something in me snapped. 3 years of being undervalued, dismissed, and now watching him try to literally break my work. It was too much. My hobby project is the only reason this company has any value at all, I said, my voice steady despite my rage. Without my design, Bloomtech is just another failed startup with fancy brochures and empty promises. Addison stepped between us. Stop it, both of you. She turned to William. Put everything back and step away from the lab equipment. Now. He stared at her in disbelief. You're siding with her? After everything I've done to make this company legitimate? Legitimate? Zoe spoke up, moving forward with her phone still recording. Is that what you call taking credit for other people's work? Is that what you call this? She gestured to the destruction around us. William's face contorted with rage. He lunged toward Zoe, reaching for her phone. Give me that! I moved without thinking, stepping between them. Don't you dare touch her. He shoved me aside, hard enough that I stumbled back against a lab table. Pain shot through my hip as it connected with the metal edge. Mom! Addison cried out. What happened next unfolded in seconds. Tyler grabbed William, restraining him. Addison rushed to my side. And Zoe, her hands shaking but her voice steady, announced, I got all of that on video. The destruction of company property and assault. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway, alerted by the commotion. As they took in the scene, Addison straightened up, her CEO persona firmly back in place. Please escort Mr. Donovan from the building, she instructed. His access is revoked, effective immediately. William's face drained of color. Addison, you can't. I can and I am. Her voice was ice. As CEO, I'm terminating your employment for cause. Destruction of company property and assault are grounds for immediate dismissal. You're making a mistake, he warned as the guards approached. This company needs me. Your investors trust me. We'll see about that, Addison replied. Then, to the guards, please ensure he takes only his personal belongings. Nothing from any labs or offices. As they led a protesting William away, Addison turned to me. Are you okay? I nodded, rubbing my hip. I'll have a bruise, but I'm fine. Tyler cleared his throat. I should document this incident and begin the formal termination paperwork. Thank you, Tyler, Addison said. When he left, she surveyed the damage to the lab. He really was trying to destroy everything, wasn't he? Not everything, I said. Just my contributions. Addison walked over to a cabinet and unlocked it with her master key. Inside sat another prototype, the latest version, untouched. He didn't find this one. We moved it last week for additional testing. I moved to stand beside her, looking at the sleek device. It's beautiful, I said softly. Even better than I imagined when I first sketched the concept. It works perfectly, Zoe added, joining us. The clinical trials last month showed 99.7% accuracy compared to invasive methods. That's unprecedented. Addison turned to face me. I owe you an apology, Mom. A big one. I let William convince me that I needed to separate from you to be taken seriously. I betrayed your trust, and I'm so sorry. The sincerity in her eyes melted some of the ice that had formed around my heart. Thank you for saying that. I want to make this right. she continued. Legally and personally. You designed this technology. You should get full credit and fair compensation. I nodded, appreciating her words but still wary. I'd like that in writing this time. Of course, Addison agreed. And she hesitated. I'd like you to consider staying with Bloom Tech, officially, as our Chief Innovation Officer with equity and a proper contract. The offer caught me off guard. After everything that had happened, I'd assumed my time at Bloom Tech was over for good. You don't have to answer now, Addison added quickly. Just think about it. Before I could respond, James appeared in the doorway. I just passed William being escorted out. Did I miss something exciting? Just the implosion of a narcissist, Zoe replied, holding up her phone. All captured for posterity. As James was brought up to speed, I wandered around the lab, touching the familiar equipment, remembering the long hours and breakthroughs that had happened in this room. Despite everything, I felt a sense of pride seeing my designs come to life. Later that afternoon, we gathered in the conference room, Addison, James, Tyler, Zoe, and I, to discuss next steps. The atmosphere was entirely different from our tense meeting earlier. We need to move quickly, Tyler advised. William will likely try to retaliate in some way. James nodded. I've expedited the patent applications. We should have preliminary protection within days. What about Vivian Tao and Meridian Medical? I asked. Addison grimaced. They've put the investment on hold pending resolution of the ownership issues. I may be able to help with that, I said slowly, an idea forming. If we can demonstrate that the ownership question is resolved and the technology is secure, would they reconsider? Possibly, Addison said. Vivian seemed genuinely impressed with the potential of the biotemp system. Then let's invite her back, I suggested, with a new proposal. Addison looked skeptical. What kind of proposal? One that acknowledges the true creator of the technology while securing Bloom Tech's future. I turned to James. If we create a separate entity for the intellectual property, with me as the primary owner, we could license the technology exclusively to Bloom Tech under favorable terms. James considered this. A holding company for the patents? That could work. It protects your interests while giving Bloom Tech the rights to develop and market the technology. And it gives the investors a clean separation between the IP ownership and the operating company, Tyler added, catching on. Addison looked thoughtful. So Bloom Tech would pay licensing fees to this new entity? Yes, but at rates that allow the company to thrive, I clarified. I want Bloom Tech to succeed, Addison. That hasn't changed. The discussion continued well into the evening as we hammered out details. By the time we finished, we had the framework for a solution that protected my intellectual property while securing Bloom Tech's future. As Addison and I walked to our cars, the evening air cool against our skin, she asked the question that had been hovering between us all day. Why did you take that prototype home that day? Did you already know what William was planning? I shook my head. No. It was instinct, I suppose. After being dismissed so publicly, I just couldn't bear to leave behind the thing I was most proud of creating. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. For what it's worth, I never should have let him come between us. The company was always meant to be our thing, yours and mine. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of that. As I drove home that night, emotionally exhausted but oddly energized, my phone chimed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. You think you've won? This isn't over. I made Bloom Tech what it is, and I can tear it down just as easily. You have 24 hours to reconsider your position before I reach out to every investor, competitor, and regulatory agency with what I know about your precious company's methods. I pulled over, my hands shaking as I reread the message. Just when I thought we were finding our way forward, William was determined to drag us all down with him. And the worst part? He might actually have the power to do it. I didn't sleep that night. William's threat hung over me like a storm cloud, dark and ominous. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. I wouldn't let fear dictate my actions, not anymore. I forwarded the message to Addison, James, and Tyler with a simple note. We need to talk. Breakfast at my place, 7 a.m. They all arrived promptly, gathered around my kitchen table with coffee mugs and concerned expressions as I showed them the original message. "Classic intimidation tactic," James said, setting down his mug. "But it demonstrates consciousness of guilt. He wouldn't be threatening you if he didn't know he was in the wrong. What could he possibly have that would damage the company?" I asked Addison. "Is there anything I should know?" She hesitated, glancing at Tyler. "There were some shortcuts taken with the preliminary testing data we submitted to the FDA. Nothing fraudulent," she quickly added. "Just some results presented more favorably than they might have been." "William's doing?" I guessed. Addison nodded. "He said it was standard practice that everyone polishes their submissions to get past the initial screening." Tyler leaned forward. "Even if that's true, it creates a vulnerability. If William goes public with accusations, it will trigger an investigation. Even if nothing serious is found, the delay and publicity could be devastating." "So what do we do?" Addison asked, looking younger and more vulnerable than I'd seen her in years. I took a deep breath. "We get ahead of it. We go to the FDA ourselves, explain the situation, and submit corrected data. We demonstrate transparency and commitment to ethical practices." "That could delay approval by months," Addison protested. "Yes," I agreed, "but it's better than having approval revoked later. Or worse, having a product on the market that hasn't been properly vetted." James nodded approvingly. "And we address William's threat directly. If he knows we've already self-reported, his leverage disappears." "What about the investors?" Addison asked. "Vivian Tao and Meridian were our best hope for funding. Without that investment, we can't survive a prolonged regulatory review." "Leave Vivian to me," I said, an idea forming. "But first, we need to remove any power William still has over BloomTech. Tyler, what's his official status right now?" "Terminated for cause as of yesterday," Tyler replied. "But he still owns 15% of the company's shares from his initial investment." I considered this. "Can we buy him out?" Addison shook her head. "Not without the Series B funding. We don't have that kind of liquidity. Then we need leverage of our own," I said. I turned to James. "What if we counter his threat with evidence of his attempted intellectual property theft and destruction of company property? Could that be enough to pressure him into a settlement?" James scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Combined with Zoe's video evidence of his assault on you, it might be. At minimum, it gives us a strong position for negotiation." By mid-morning, our plan was in motion. Tyler was drafting a formal response to William, outlining the legal consequences he faced if he pursued his threats. James was finalizing the patent applications and the structure for my new intellectual property holding company. Addison was preparing revised submissions for the FDA, and I was sitting across from Vivian Tao in a quiet cafe 2 blocks from BloomTech's offices. "I appreciate you meeting with me," I said as the waiter set down our tea. "I'm intrigued," she replied, studying me with sharp eyes. "It's not often I see a family drama threaten to derail a promising medical technology." I smiled ruefully. Not my finest moment, I admit, but necessary. "So I gather." She took a sip of her tea. "You wanted to discuss a new arrangement?" I laid out our proposal. A clean separation between the intellectual property, owned by my new company, and BloomTech as the development and marketing entity. I explained the licensing agreement we envisioned, then came to the heart of the matter. What BloomTech needs now is steady leadership and proper capitalization. Addison is young but capable. With the right mentorship and financial backing, she can make this company extraordinary. Vivian set down her cup. "And you believe Meridian should provide that backing, even after yesterday's display?" "Especially after yesterday," I countered. "You now have transparency that few investors ever get. You've seen the challenges and how they're being addressed. You know exactly who created the core technology and that it will be properly protected and licensed." She looked skeptical. "And the CFO who was escorted out of the building? Being bought out," I said confidently, though we hadn't yet secured William's agreement. "His equity will be redistributed to strengthen the company's leadership team." Vivian leaned back, considering. "And your role in all this going forward?" "I'll be running my IP company and serving as Chief Innovation Officer for BloomTech. I'll focus on what I do best, creating and refining the technology, while Addison handles the business operations. With a new CFO, I presume." I nodded. Someone with both experience and integrity. We're already interviewing candidates. For a long moment, Vivian was silent, tapping her manicured fingernail against the table. Then she reached for her bag and withdrew a sleek tablet. I'm going to show you something that wasn't included in our formal evaluation of Bloom Tech, she said, pulling up a document. This is the report from our technical team after they tested your prototype. Not the official one. This is what they said internally. She turned the tablet toward me. I scanned the document, my eyes widening at phrases like revolutionary approach, game-changing accuracy, and potential to redefine the standard of care. They were impressed, I said softly. More than impressed, Vivian corrected. They were excited. Do you know how rare that is? Most medical devices we see are incremental improvements at best. Yours represents a genuine breakthrough. Hope flickered in my chest. So Meridian is still interested? Under the right conditions, yes. She took back the tablet. Reorganize your leadership, clean up any regulatory issues, and establish clear ownership of the intellectual property. Do those things, and we can discuss terms. As I left the cafe, I felt lighter than I had in days. There was still work to be done, difficult conversations to be had, but for the first time, I could see a path forward. Back at Bloom Tech, I found Addison in the conference room with Tyler and Zoe, staring at her phone. William agreed, she said, looking up as I entered. He'll take a reduced buyout in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement and release of all claims. What changed his mind? I asked, surprised by the sudden reversal. Zoe smiled slyly. I may have sent him the video of his lab rampage, along with a personal note reminding him of California's laws regarding destruction of property and assault. The threat of criminal charges tends to focus the mind, Tyler added dryly. I sat down beside Addison. I just met with Vivian Tao. Meridian is still interested, provided we address their concerns about leadership and regulatory compliance. Addison's eyes lit up. Really? That's incredible. What did you tell her? The truth, I said simply. That we're reorganizing the leadership, addressing the regulatory issues, and establishing clear ownership of the intellectual property. And that we have an extraordinary product that could change patients' lives. Over the next month, we worked tirelessly to fulfill those promises. Addison led a thorough review of all regulatory submissions, correcting any questionable data. We finalized the structure of my new company, Nova Innovations, which would hold the patents and license them exclusively to Bloom Tech. Williams' shares were repurchased and redistributed, strengthening the core team's stake in the company's success. And through it all, Addison and I rebuilt our relationship, one conversation at a time. We talked about the hurt we'd both caused and felt, the miscommunications, the assumptions. We set boundaries and expectations for our professional collaboration, while nurturing our personal connection. 6 weeks after that fateful day when I'd been publicly fired, we gathered again in Bloom Tech's conference room. But this time, the atmosphere was celebratory. Vivian Tao and her team sat across from us, signing the final documents for Meridian's investment. Congratulations, Vivian said, passing the signed papers to Addison. I look forward to a long and profitable partnership. As champagne was poured and toasts made, I found myself standing slightly apart, watching my daughter shine in her element. She caught my eye across the room and raised her glass in a private salute that said more than words could. Later, as the party wound down, Zoe approached me with a small gift bag. A little something to commemorate the occasion, she said with a smile. Inside was a beautiful silver picture frame containing a pencil sketch, my original concept drawing for the biotemp monitor, carefully preserved and matted. Across the bottom, Zoe had written, "Great ideas deserve to be recognized. Thank you for showing me what that looks like." Tears stung my eyes as I hugged her. Thank you, Zoe, for everything. So, Addison said, joining us. Chief Innovation Officer Grenville, what brilliant ideas are you cooking up next, now that you have a proper lab and a proper title? I smiled, thinking of the notebook filled with new sketches sitting on my desk at home. I might have a few things in mind, but first I think I'm due for a vacation. Care to join me? Just as mother and daughter, no business talk allowed? Addison's surprise melted into genuine warmth. I'd love that. Where are we going? Remember that beach house in Carmel where we used to spend summers when you were little? I was thinking of renting it for a week. Perfect, she agreed, linking her arm through mine. As we walked out of the building together, I reflected on the painful journey of the past few months. I'd lost my place in my daughter's company only to gain something much more valuable: my professional integrity, a new business of my own, and most importantly, an honest relationship with Addison. The prototype that I'd impulsively slipped into my purse that day hadn't just protected my intellectual property, it had catalyzed a transformation in both our lives. Sometimes I realized you have to lose what you thought you wanted to find what you truly need. And sometimes, the most important things you create aren't products or patents, but the relationships you rebuild along the way.